Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma and Zach Metkler.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name's Joe Kuzma, and over here to that side, somewhere over there, there we go. I got it. It's like flipped or mirrored. You know how it works.
Oh, yeah.
For those of you who can see this is Brian still missing in action, which is okay. The old guy needs his naps and nap time and everything like that. So instead, welcome back finally, because I've been trying to pry him to come back to the show here, and we have a topic of which we agree with a lot in the back rooms. That we're going to talk about. So a coach slash professor slash genius slash whatever we want to call him, the jack of all trades, Zach of all trades. There we go.
It is.
Hey, Zach Metkler, what's going on, my friend?
Not much. Crazy world. We're in this Arctic blast up here in upstate New York right now. So I'm just trying to, stay warm and keep myself out of trouble. I had some car problems today, which kind of created some havoc, but we're making through and taking one day at a time. Now that, the Steelers season's done and Steelers fans have a lot of stuff to complain about, we're kind of just sitting there taking the wave at this point.
There was a period here when we first, I don't know if you were aboard yet here when I first started doing the podcast. I was doing it solo, and then Brian became kind of my permanent partner in crime here, and we had a lot of bonus football to talk about. Then all of a sudden we didn't, so I didn't really know what to do with myself. Having the wild card game in itself was like, oh great, we have another game to talk about. That's another week where I don't have to come up with some type of BS, but there's plenty of that going around the internet that we could talk about. I just keep tabling a few things, and we may have a guest later this week or sometime next week heading into the Super Bowl here too, so that'll be fun as well. So eventually I'm going to get around to some of these things I say I'm going to talk about, but we had all kinds of news. Oh, you know what? Let's kick it off with the most recent thing fresh in my head. I didn't put this on the format, the small format that we actually have, which Zach will. Has anyone ever called you Zach of all trades, by the way?
No, that's the first time. I like it. You might as well go and trademark that patent. I'm all for it.
Yeah, we'll put the little restricted logo on it so it's official. Anyways, the most recent thing, yeah, and as far as format, like when I say we're least prepared, we're fairly prepared because all we do is talk all these guys, we're all in these back rooms and stuff, as we like to call them. We're talking football like constantly, and then when you're writing and producing content, this stuff sticks in your brain. So sometimes it's like I try and draw it from memory from like a day before or whenever the heck I wrote something, and I have to consult something, and I probably annoy people. But otherwise, the format was I threw out a few names. I didn't throw out TJ Watt yet because I'm like, let's see what happens with this. And then we just got this information that Mark Madden, surprise surprise, came up with some smoke signals, and there was no fire for the smoke signals of what was said. So if you're hearing anything about TJ Watt saying pack my expletive up to Wisconsin, according to sources per TJ Watt on Twitter, the official TJ Watt, he says, per sources, like these guys do, this was never said or done, and this didn't happen. And then like everybody came out of the woodwork. His brother came out, JJ, Ramon Foster, and several other people that don't care for Mark Madden. And he's nowhere, I don't know about you, Zach. I haven't done it. Brian's been challenging him to fights here on the podcast. He wants to do like a charity fight or whatever. He said, I will fight you. And more explicitly, he says, I will kick your ass. And that's got to be every Yinzer or Steeler fan or Pittsburgh sports fan's dream at this point. The guy creates so much controversy, but it's not. When he says sources, is this like an equipment guy that was in the hallway, a maintenance man fixing? Well, they probably don't have the water fountains running due to COVID or whatever in the building, but you know what I mean? It's like, who do you have to corroborate this or something? It's like, or is it just somebody maybe on their way out, a teammate or somebody that may not get along or something like that just lets these things leak?
I'm always very skeptical about certain individuals that have, sources, even all the way up to the big guys like Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, Jeremy Fowler, the big guys, like they all have sources and they're all well respected sources, but sources aren't always right because here's the thing. A lot of times, Kevin Colbert, Mike Tomlin, not just for the Steelers, for any team, when you have those high up people, there's some loose lipped organizations. Organizations like the Steelers aren't going to let some of that stuff out of there. I would be stunned if he actually did. Now, did he skip it? Maybe not. Now, was the exit interview, if it happened, which I have no reason to believe and not believe TJ Watt, which Mark Madden says we're all just eating out of the palm of the system's hand. I think realistically, maybe the interview might have not gone as well as it may have. I'm sure there was things that were discussed in said meeting, whether it be talking about contract, potential future, we'll talk about the way the season went. TJ is a captain. He's a leader. I'm sure he had a lot of strong opinions about how things went this season. And I don't think anybody would blame him for that. It's the season didn't end the way that any of them would have wanted it to, especially a player of TJ's stature. That being said, there's no reason to think that it's accurate. No one else corroborated that. And you're telling me there's one individual that he just happens to be so involved with that happened to pull this one out. I don't buy it. And I also, I understand that, he's pulling the stick that, TJ is just lying about it. I'm 100% not retracting my statement. What does TJ have to gain by coming out and saying that to quell the fan base? If he really was that upset about it, he wouldn't care. You know what I'm saying? That's why I don't buy into it. I think that he's the only person, Mark Madden's the only person I saw that said a single thing about it. Not a single other person who has, I'm certain, better sources within the organization said anything about it. Why would I believe this one instance is the actual case?
He's not even involved in these Zoom meetings and asking questions and stuff. I know we don't jump in them, but to be completely honest, I don't really accept some of the invitations.
I haven't heard anything else relevant come from one of his sources with the Steelers in years. Why is this all of a sudden the one? Yeah. After we've seen him go after TJ Watt in recent weeks, no less. He was on the Pat McAfee show going after TJ Watt, Cam Hayward because of their disappearing act in the playoff game, which I understand they didn't have the greatest game. They didn't really get after Baker Mayfield at all again in the wild card round. But other than that, he's just been going after him since then. Maybe it's his flavor of the month, Steelers target, since he's so anti the current guys on the roster.
With the 28-point lead, is there much getting after anybody? Is there anything to really risk? No. If you're the Browns or Baker, that's what I keep trying to tell people when it comes to playing defense. It's it's not like these guys have to play loose at all or desperate or anything. I mean, it's pretty much in the bag. You'd have to screw up royally, and if you call a game to put yourself in that position. So, what are you going to do? What are you going to get after? You know what I mean? But, yeah, it seems like Madden doesn't really like anyone, and on the
he likes Ben. He likes Ben. That's all I've seen recently. He likes Ben.
Yeah. He's full of hate, and he's not in those rooms or conversations. And I was just starting to say too, with a lot of the beat writers and stuff like that, quite a few that we have friendships with too, and that not to name names or sources or anything like that. Those guys, I kind of let them do their job and don't out them at all. But for the ones we're friendly with and whatnot, and then there's a few others that get in on this thing, and it's everybody else asks the juicy good questions. I'm not going to go out there and ask what is the standard. When you say standard is the standard or something, without naming names, we all know who it is if you tune into these type of things. But there's some people out there, and they're and some of them are some clowns that are no bigger than what we're doing, sometimes even a smaller outfit, and then there's some of them that are a part of national media that ask some of the dumbest questions. And I don't have to be part of that on a Tuesday afternoon and waste Mike Tomlin's time or anyone else's time that's been doing this. But one of the guys that is around and usually only asks a couple of good questions here or there. You don't even hear his name all of the time, but when he does say something, you tend to put more validity to it, and that's Jerry Dulac. And I know Jerry, I wouldn't say that he's never been wrong, but he's not one to say something without he feels his sources are good, And he kind of backs up what he's talking about, and he's the one that's talking about that Marquise Pouncey has pretty much told everyone that he could be walking away. And without getting into draft stuff, because we don't want this to be 3 hours long, Zach, we'll get the draft stuff later. He's got spreadsheets, and we've got content for days for everyone out there. That's a draft nut out there. We're all on board, by the way, with offensive line, right? Heavy on the offensive line. Number one pick overall, offensive line.
You can make 8 or 9. If they have 9 picks this year, they could all be offensive linemen. I wouldn't lose a second sleep.
With or without Pouncey retiring, too. We're on board with that. So
doesn't matter. He can come back and play 5 more years and I'll change my stance.
He is just very biased towards the offensive lineman, though. But you are the run game coordinator, though. I understand it. I get. What's that?
Formally, not anymore. Formally.
Oh.
No, I'm coaching running backs now.
Okay.
I was still back in Pittsburgh. Yes, I'm coaching running backs now.
Oh, that's right. So, anyways, speaking of positional coaches as well, I know we glossed over the Pouncey thing. Dulac's the one who came out and said it. Whether it happens or not, wait and see. There was some smoke around that fire, too, from them, Ben and Marquise Pouncey sitting on the bench after that game when everybody else went to the locker room. Everybody started speculating on that, and they kind of put those fires out, and now Dulac has come back with this a couple of weeks later here. But position coaches, I was segueing to position coaches. The Steelers have a new tight ends coach. You said you won't forget his name. I had to look it up again, and I should remember this because I had a neighbor with the same first name. Great guy, too. He was originally from, I don't know which borough of New York City, but he was somewhere out there, Bronx or something like that. Not the same guy, though. Alfredo Roberts. And he comes to us, the Pittsburgh Steelers, that is, the last 3-4 seasons where he was coaching the Chargers running backs, and then 17 total seasons coaching pretty much everything as far as position coaches throughout college ranks. A year he took off, I guess, to help somebody in high school. Running backs, tight ends, wide receivers, an Alfredo of all trades, as it is. But that's about all the more I could say we know about him. I guess he did play. He was in the NFL, played under Jimmy Johnson with those Dallas Cowboys teams, and I guess he caught the injury bug too, and may have not had the career that he wanted, but definitely found one with coaching, it looks like. So that's one of the new hires here. Matt Canada officially named the offensive coordinator now, so we don't have to pound the pavement and put our ear to a seashell to
Hamilton.
Yeah, find out. Hey, we're on board still. We wouldn't mind Hugh or Pep as a QB's coach.
No, I would take Pep Hamilton to coach QBs in a heartbeat.
Oh, yeah, Pep for sure. I mean, no, Pep was coaching the DC team in the XFL. I was going to say he had the young guy that went over PJ. Was it PJ Walker? But that was Houston. That was Houston. That wasn't him. He had Cardell, and Cardell looked good for 2 weeks where everybody's like, sign this guy. He's going to be the next, big Steelers guy. And then everybody all of a sudden jumped off that bandwagon, and now they're all like, oh, the Ohio State quarterbacks, they're all terrible. And it's like, now they signed Dwayne Haskins, and now you're getting a mix of both of that. And what a mess the internet is. But, before we get into all these guys that have a B in their name, you and I have discussed this. We discussed this last year. We were talking about, actually, there's 2 guys on the Lions roster right now that I said the Steelers might have interest in. Not last year, but I said maybe a possibility after this season's over, heading into this offseason 2021, because it would make financial sense when it comes to dead cap and what they're paying them for the Lions to maybe move on. One of those was Jesse James. May as well talk about it just because we had the tight end position coach thing we were talking about. I'm a big Kevin Rader guy. I think you like Kevin Rader too.
Yeah.
Think he could be a blocking tight end. We think they'll find somebody else. I hate to say off the scrap heap, but you never know. Dax Raymond, like a Xavier Grimble type, you never know who they might find there. And they may just roll with Eric Ebron as the number 1 guy there. Maybe Rader, because he plays special teams too, opens some eyes, and he might win a spot also. They may not heavily invest. I know some people are out there throw a first-round pick or second-round pick. I don't know how high you go with tight ends. Sometimes it's look at the what's his name, Hayden Hurst, for example. You know what I mean? Hunter Henry took a while too. He was constantly injured, and I don't know that I could hold that against him. But even Ebron himself was a first-round pick that kind of fell out of grace there for a little while as well. Also formerly of the Lions. But Jesse James, you and I were like, hey, and everybody's like, hey, this guy, if you could get him cheap, because everybody doesn't want to make the money. You know what I mean? If I'm a football player, I want the best deal for me, and that includes being financially smart. Now, I might take a discount if I'm going to Florida or Las Vegas to the Raiders, where, you know, there's no state income tax, Dallas, Houston, those type of places. You might be able to convince me to take 1.8 million versus, you know, 2.1 million or something, because I'm getting a tax savings break, and, you know, wherever I'm moving to, instead of, you know, the lesser. I'm sure living in New York isn't cheap. So if you go to the Jets or Giants versus, you know, playing for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I'm sure the real estate markets are completely different there. But Jesse James, just to throw it out there, since it's another thing that's been tossed around, I don't know how I'd feel about him coming back. I mean, it's a guy that knows the system. He seems like you breathe on him and he's tackled easily, not very much speed, dependable receiver. Decent blocker. I wouldn't put him. I'd put him above Ebron maybe, but where do you put him? He's not even as good as Vance McDonald in that category. So, you know, you say cheap. I guess it depends on if he could find work elsewhere and somebody wants to pay him. Otherwise, you know, why would you? I don't feel the need to bring him back. I feel he's just maybe a depth piece who could potentially not even hold the tight end 2 spot on the depth chart. If he were signed.
Yeah, it would depend on how the team views Raider. I would assume that, you know, Mike Tomlin has not gone out of his way to compliment players before, and he spoke well of Raider and his contributions there at the end of the year, which I thought spoke volumes in terms of them probably giving him the opportunity with a full offseason. I know the offseason as of right now looks like it's going to be very similar to what it was last year, but still having him in the door with, you know, 2 games worth of, you know, film to kind of go off of in terms of audition, so to speak, will help him out immensely. The only thing that concerns me with Jesse James is I wonder if his comments afterwards comparing the Steelers to the Kardashians whenever he was on his way out is a bridge that's burned that he nor the team would want to rekindle. But I also feel like that could be a potential media blowing things up more than it actually probably was. It was just an offhand comment that he made in an interview. I don't really think that he holds any animosity probably towards the players on the team. Sure doesn't hold any animosity towards the Steelers, who let him go test the open market because they knew he was going to make more money. A lot of time fans look at it as the team just lets the guy go. They're not going to hold the guy captive if they know that he can make more money on the open market. It's not that they don't want to keep him. You know, they're going to make him an offer that probably gets turned down right away when he knows he's making $4.5 or so million a year with the Lions. The Steelers weren't going to pay him that money, paying Vance what they were paying him. And being in the market, obviously, for an upgrade at the position after they went after Eric Ebron. So clearly they were in the market for improving themselves, you know, at the position after Jesse James walked. You know, they had the whole carousel last year with Nick Vannett and, you know, dealing with the guys that were moving around back there. But, you know, I don't think it's necessarily a necessity to get James back when there's other glaring needs, and they could probably find someone with one of their not projected 9 picks throughout the draft, especially on day 2 or day 3, which seems to be kind of the sweet spot for that top tier tight ends we see in the NFL right now in terms of guys like Kittle, Kelsey, Ertz, Waller, you know, guys that weren't the premier top of their class guys that kind of fell in the cracks for whatever reason. That's kind of the sweet spot. I know fans will sit there and say, well, the Steelers have had no luck with guys like Jesse James and Gentry, but I don't think anyone was ever looking at Jesse James or Gentry as being the top of their class in any capacity when they were coming into the draft. It's not exactly the same argument. So I wouldn't be opposed to Jesse James. I think if he came back, it'd be a nice depth signing. But I agree, if it was for the right price. And how's the team view Raider? If the team thinks that Raider could really iron out a role as that number 2 spot, especially in a Matt Canada offense that really kind of likes to use tight ends in that fashion and kind of have them be the ones that are going to help move the sticks and also just be inline blockers, you know, I think they might feel the need to just want to keep him for cheap. We'll see what he can do. Let Ebron kind of do his thing for one more year before they probably let him walk in test free agency and then try to adjust the position either via the draft this year or the following year.
Yeah, personally, I mean, there's only so many picks to go around. Now, it all depends. We were discussing at least one comp pick should be added for Javon Hargrave. It'll be the compensatory picks, top 32 free agents, and then they have some formula figuring out where they fall in there. And Hargrave signed a pretty healthy deal that should be maybe a third rounder. Yeah. And
third or fourth. And I think it's projected for a fourth right now, if I'm not mistaken.
Was it fourth? I mean, Eagles fans were kind of complaining about what they paid for this guy, and the team was a dumpster fire. I don't think that reflects badly on him, and I think he turned it on a little later in the season as well. But the other guy was B.J. Finney that I always forget about. We don't know how that's going to pan out with him having been traded and everything. I forgot about Nick Vannett for a hot minute too, and he was brought on with a trade because of injuries. Vance McDonald got banged up for like a week or two there and was unavailable, and then Xavier Grimble got waived with a injury settlement and popped up in Indianapolis, I think. Mm-hmm. So I think they just kind of felt that, okay, Xavier is not the guy here. And if I remember correctly, he had a pretty critical drop in the last game he played as a Steeler. He had a critical drop and also wasn't doing very well at blocking. And some people will say, well, Eric Ebron doesn't do that either. And it's like, well, he's a higher priced free agent that gets a little more leeway in those sort of things. Plus he has a history of doing big things for the other guys, like a journeyman who had to claw and bite his way up onto the roster from, bouncing around from different teams and different cities to a practice squad. So completely different scenario. But Jesse James was a $22.6 million deal when that was signed, 4 years, and then over the cap is always showing these void years that are added in here. And our other guy we're going to talk about right now is Matty Stafford as well, and that news just kind of was news to my ears. Unfortunately, we don't have news that Ben Roethlisberger is heading out the door anytime soon. We know he's got 1 year left. We know if they could save $19 million. He has a 41 hit towards the cap, but that doesn't mean he's due $41 million this year. That's the way they do the accounting in the books. So they can't save $41 million by telling Ben, hey, see ya, don't let the door hit you on the way out. I don't know if they would do that to a player such as of Ben's caliber, but they kind of showed Troy the door, and I kind of have a feeling with Troy too. Troy still wanted to play. I think Ben still wants to play, but I think when they do these deals too, it's with an understanding that, we've got your guarantee spread out. You're still getting something here, but you're not going to realize the full value maybe of this contract. And $19 million is nothing to sneeze at versus I think Troy was probably owed like 3 or 4 or something and still made, they were still paying him a year or two after he was already gone. Same with Heath Miller. I think Brett Kiesel to a lower extent may have had an extra year. So they got some guys that stay on the books like that when you get talking about your upper echelon of players. Ben's only going to save you 19, but when we originally were looking at this as far as veterans and people last year who might be available, what about Stafford? Well, they're not going to save a whole lot of money. Last season, his dead money would have been $19 million. They would have only saved 14. You're not going to make that deal and then try and find another quarterback. The Lions at the top of the draft right now may be in a position to go after one of these young quarterbacks. Have already, kind of told Stafford you could start seeking a trade partner. And who was it that came out? Somebody came out, one of the guys we mentioned, just like a Schefter or Albert Breer or somebody like that. They came out and said that they had the Steelers at the top of their list. And I'm like, how in the heck are the Steelers going to afford that? Now, if Ben walked away, they might be able to do some funny business with this. Of course, with the Lions cutting Stafford, he only counts 6 toward the cap for this season, 3 towards their cap the following season. I got this all mixed up. He's actually at 19. It was more before that. It was more before that. It's 19 right now. It's 14 in the cap savings, 20 in the savings for 2022. Read the wrong lines here. So they're looking at saving $34 million versus paying him less than that, I guess, like about half of what he's owed. But here's a guy, buddy Chris Collinsworth. Here's a guy, 33 years old. And we said, okay, he's not a spring chicken, but that's a good 5-6 years, maybe a little longer if he's on the Tom Brady sauce, that, he's somebody that's produced and put up huge numbers. Just like Barry Sanders that was there was no other team around him, and he still, tends to get it done. I don't think he's anywhere near awful. It's somebody that, he's not going to be long-term, like 15-plus years like a Ben Roethlisberger or some of these other guys, but it's still somebody that you could certainly build your team around and is contract is a heck of a lot friendlier at this point versus what these quarterbacks are getting paid this day and age, to where if you got to give a little bit of something up, and Ben's saying, hey, sayonara, along with his buddy Pouncey, I'm jumping to get this guy. I mean, unless you feel that good, and I don't feel that good about the Steelers landing somebody in the draft. People are going to say, oh, Mac Jones or something like that. There's still no guarantees there at like 20, whatever they're picking, 24, whatever it is, 23. I don't remember what the heck it is now. But Matt Stafford, your thoughts? I think you've been mostly on board with me on this too.
Yeah, no, I've been a huge fan of Matthew Stafford. My description of him has always been, his career has been defined as being the best non-elite quarterback in the NFL. And the only reason I even call him non-elite is because he was drafted in a situation where he had Megatron, who I think is still one of the greatest receivers physically, just overall working body, that we've had in this generation. You know, no knock on Julio, no knock on any of those other guys. Like, Megatron was a cut above the rest, and had he played an entire career and not retired prematurely to save his body, who knows the numbers he would have put up with Matthew Stafford, and who knows what the Lions could have done. You know, there was a window where he just had no talent around him. The Lions defense struggled. You know, they kind of had that 1 year, 2 years, whenever the Terrell Lawson was the defensive coordinator there, and they looked pretty good. But then, you know, the run game has been terrible. The last 3 years of his career there has been basically a waste. You know, Matthew Patricia went from being the defensive coordinator with the Lions, or I'm sorry, the Patriots, head coach of the Lions, and then back to being position coach or whatever with the Patriots. Like, yeah, it's not the trip.
Come back home, and then, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, Belichick will take care of you. You know, so I think it's hard to sit here and say that he's not a top tier talent. Like, from an arm perspective, like, you can't deny it. Like, him and Aaron Rodgers are the only two quarterbacks in NFL history with 45,000 plus yards and less than 150 interceptions. Like, you don't see that type of production very often from the position, with having both things. You know, so I really think that from a talent perspective, he's still young. In my mind, he's 31 to 32. I think everyone just likes to assume that Matthew Stafford is like right there behind Rodgers in terms of age. He was young when he came out, and he's only been in the league now for 11 years. So he's still got some juice left in the tank. He's been he's been healthy his entire career up until he started getting the injury bug last year, where we've seen a little more banged up stuff here. You know, but he still has prime productive years. He is in the peak of his career right now, where he still has some years left where he could really get it going there. And if you give him the structure of the Steelers with, you know, the situation they have with Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, James Washington, hopefully revamped offensive line going into next year, hopefully an improved running back room going into next season. You still have Ebron. We just talked about Raider. Like, he has weapons around him that he hasn't really had consistently in his time there. The Lions didn't really have a run game. I know that people will sit there and say, well, neither did the Steelers, but, you know, neither did the Lions. You know, they had no real offensive line in front of them for most of the time while he was there. The offensive line improved under Hank Fraley the last year, but they still didn't really have an offensive line before that.
Who, by the way, he's staying in Detroit too. He's not.
I know. I was bummed to hear that. I was really hoping that he was going to come this way, but I understand. You know, I know Lions fans were elated to see that. You know, and then he had Kenny Golladay the last couple of years, but he's been banged up recently. You know, he had Marvin Jones, who was great, but he's aging. You know, like he hasn't really had a consistent cast of characters with a coaching staff that really knew how to put wins together consistently. I'm not sitting there saying this coaching staff right now, as we see it, is a Super Bowl caliber coaching staff, because they haven't been to the big dance in over 10 years. But what have the Lions done in the last 10 years? They haven't done anything to support them. There's been a carousel of head coaches. They got rid of Jim Caldwell after a 9-7 season, or a 7-9 season. You know, like, it's not a staple of consistency whatsoever for a guy who has the talent to be a very good quarterback. Now, I think you put him in he's going to go to a situation where he can win. He's not going to want to get traded to a team that's a dumpster fire, that's not going to support him with talent and has no chance to win. If he wanted to go and stay and play for a team that's not going to win, he wouldn't want to get out of Detroit. He'd just stay there. So clearly he's going to want to go to a team like Pittsburgh, like Indianapolis, teams like that have a structure in place with a very good roster. I know we're a Steelers podcast. My gut is the Lions. It's ever since I saw the news, it just
the Colts. You mean? Yeah,
the Colts. I'm sorry. Yeah,
the money.
The Colts. And they have the money. They have a great coaching staff. They have a great front office. They have great ownership. They have everything going for them except the quarterback. No knock on Phillip Rivers, but Phillip Rivers, the writing was on the wall when he signed that 1 year, 2 year deal, whatever it was with them. last year. Like, the writing was on the wall. He was not their long-term option. Matt Stafford is going to make a team instantly who needs a better quarterback situation into that step. Now, I think the big question here, which I'm sure we're going to go into real quick, if Ben doesn't leave, is it worth it?
How do you do that?
You can't do it.
Be playing James Pierre in only 10 men on defense.
I'll expect a call from Mike Tomlin shortly thereafter to call me and ask him to come play center for him, because I'll do it for next to no money just to get beat up every week. So you can't do it. So this is all under the presumption that Ben leaves, and if that's the case and he does leave, I'll take that contract before I take Deshaun Watson, before I take a shot on a guy like Cam Newton, before I go and roll with a rookie, which I think the only rookie that would even come close to being within a firing distance from a 24 would be a Trey Lance. I know fans will say Mac Jones, and they'll say Kyle Trask. I have the next 3 months to discuss with you why I don't like that, so I'm not going to do that right now. But, there's really unless they move up, there's really not a realistic spot for him. Matthew Stafford would make the most sense from a talent perspective and just from an overall financial perspective. His contract is cheap for a franchise quarterback in today's age. That money, you're never going to see deals like that. Ryan Tannehill is about the only quarterback that comes even close to being a franchise quarterback that also has a moderate price tag with him.
Yeah, and we're not talking Ryan Fitzpatrick, who could be turns into a pumpkin in a pick machine out of nowhere. But that's Stafford. Somebody had said, "Oh, well, injuries." Well, yeah, he missed half the season the previous year, but otherwise, this guy's been all 16 games, with the exception of when he first came into the league. The first 2 years, and he was hit around like a pinata for a good series here in between, and he still doesn't cough up the ball a whole lot of times. I mean, he's had most recently, this was 26 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. Last year in only 8 games, he was 19-5 and 1 yard shy of 2,500 yards. He would have had he was on pace for 5,000 yards. And 38 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. I mean, that's pretty wild. But you're right. They get rid of Jim Caldwell's the guy. He got this team into the playoffs 2 out of the 4 seasons that he was there. And he had 11-5 year, a 7-9 year, and then 2 9-7s. And it's just like you're playing in a division also with the Green Bay Packers, who usually just don't lay down, and whatever bipolar thing the Vikings got going on, they're usually a talented squad. And then there's the Bears, and you talk about bipolar, it's bear polar there. So not polar bear. Anyhow, not to talk about all the Lions woes and everything like that, but this is a guy that's usually putting up about in the neighborhood of 4,200 to 4,500 passing yards. Maybe not as of recent, maybe just because he doesn't have the weapons, but they haven't had carry on Johnson, Amir Abdullah. I mean, at some point he had Reggie Bush in his backfield, after Reggie's already been in the league 10 years. What's that? Adrian Peterson this season. I mean, it's just, that's a mess, and it's something that would make a lot of sense only in the aspect that the Steelers have the money and have he's not coming to Pittsburgh to be the backup. So stop thinking, oh, we could use a really solid backup. The people who play Madden and maybe turn off the salary cap. But, in some other fantasy versus reality news, as we've already allotted most of our time for this stuff and haven't even gotten to it yet, I'm getting tired of hearing about the guys that are playing in the Super Bowl or going to be going to the Super Bowl here in just under 2 weeks that are formerly of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And a lot of people are like, hey, look at this. One of these 2 guys is going to get a ring. And those 2 guys are Antonio Brown or Ronald Ocean or whatever other names he goes by, and LeVeon Bell, neither of which were active in the conference championship games this past weekend to help their teams get into the Super Bowl. Neither were available to play. And quite frankly, from the way it looks, even week 17, Le'Veon Bell didn't start. It was Darrell Williams who's starting in place of Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the divisional round and everything like that. So with CEH or whatever you want to call him out, they didn't even go back to Bell, and he's been so insignificant. And let's start off there too. They haven't even played a full season with their respective teams they're on now. They latched on to these contenders after kind of seeing, well, let's see if Kansas City's still. True or false? Has Kansas City been a good team the last couple of years? They are defending Super Bowl champions. I don't know if that counts for anything.
They've had hosted 3 straight AFC
Yeah.
Championship game. So I'd say, they've been all right the last couple of years.
Yeah, they're doing okay
You could
there.
make the argument that it wasn't for Frank Clark, or not Frank Clark, whoever was his offsides in the AFC Championship game 2 years ago. They would be going for a 3P right now.
Yeah, yeah. And you've also got Bell. Let's talk about this. There's been a long time since he's been a Steeler. We're talking about 2017. It's not like this guy left and went to a championship team and signed the big deal he was seeking. He lost money sitting out a year in 2018 in order to sign with the Jets, of which he didn't do anything there. And then specifically this year, he didn't do anything. He played in the first week. Then he got hurt. He went on IR. Then they activated him. Then he played week 5, and then he was released. And that whole thing there is a dumpster fire to begin with. If you followed the Jets at all this year, he ran 19 times for 74 yards. No touchdowns as part of that. He jumps in with the Chiefs, I think, by week 8, week 9 here, and he's carried the ball 63 total times during the regular season, which is only one more than Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he's not getting touches. Edwards-Helaire and Williams are the guys that are getting it, and then they still have the guy that opted out for the season that didn't play this year too. So I mean, Bell ain't even going to be there next year. If he gets a ring, it's a participation trophy, in my opinion. Also, but the same way. Well, hold on. When they played the Browns, he carried the ball twice in this divisional round game for all of 6 total yards. We're talking about James Harrison with Patriots type production here. Newsflash, it was only that last game of the year against the Jets. He didn't do anything the rest of that postseason, as everyone wanted to make some feel-good story that he escaped Pittsburgh. But at least in that case, he was like recently fresh from the Steelers. Bell is 3 years removed now. Antonio Brown is the same. Here's a guy that started to show his temper tantrums. You started to learn a little more about his eccentricity, if that's a word. And all of a sudden, it's like he snaps. He leaves practice. I guess he got mad about the team voting for an award. I don't know. That was a Mark Madden thing too, probably. And then Juju got the MVP or whatever that year, and I guess he skipped out on practice before Week 17 in a must-win situation with the Bengals, where they were still in playoff contention after the biggest game he had in a year against the Saints, which made no sense to me. And then he left at halftime of that game because he was benched. He wasn't at practice, so Tomlin said, sorry, these are my rules. As much as you want to say about Mike Tomlin, everyone's like, oh, he's just a cheerleader. Oh, he's such a player guy. You got to be tough. He made that decision. That's the kind of decision that Bill Belichick makes, like in the Super Bowl with, what's his name, Malcolm Butler or whatever. And probably cost them the game not having him play there, arguably, as well. He leaves and then starts demanding a trade. Then he starts dictating where he's going, and he finally ends up with the Raiders. He shows up in a hot air balloon for training camp. He doesn't practice because he burned up his feet in some cryogenic chamber with all kind of blisters. Then he's painting his old Steelers helmet silver because they discontinued it. It's no longer a permitted helmet by the league. And he's like boycotting and saying he's not going to play unless he could have his helmet. And they took one off of him. Then he painted another one. I would have loved to see. Nobody got photos of that, I don't think. But I would have loved to see it. It would have looked like my kid doing a little like refrigerator art thing, like squiggles or whatever, with some Walmart dollar spray paint. You know what I mean? If he even got the line straight on the helmet, that would be hilarious. But okay. Then he doesn't even play in the regular season. I think he got in one preseason game where he actually put the pads on for a few plays, and then he gets into some I don't even know what was all laced in his conversation. Apparently, swearing, racial epithets, and all kinds of other things with general manager Mike Mayock. I guess also in the presence maybe of John Gruden. They're like, see ya. His contract's null and void. He doesn't make a penny playing for the Raiders. He was just looking for a cash out, I think, and not wanting to play, even though he was entertaining on Hard Knocks. And then he goes over, and again, come over to the Patriots. We'll rehabilitate you. And it's like he goes and plays week 2, the only game he plays. I guess he caught like 4 passes. I had it here. It was like 4 passes. He got a touchdown. It was like 60-ish yards. All of a sudden, he's Tom Brady's BFF. He's living with them. And boom, the whole sexual harassment charges and all of these things start coming out, sexual assault, whatever the heck the accusations were, whatever was alleged. And you start hearing some other things about, coming back from throwing furniture off a balcony. And, he's got the Hulk Hogan thing going where he painted part of his beard, like bleached it blonde, or his mustache or whatever the heck he's doing. He looked like he was out of his freaking mind. He starts telling everybody in the league that he's retiring. Then he's saying he's going to make a comeback. Then he says he's going to retire. And you didn't hear a peep out of this guy the entire offseason almost. He finally got him out of sight, out of mind. And all of a sudden, Tampa Bay has some injuries with their wide receiver core. And Tom Brady, I guess, helps his BFF get a job. Obviously, Bruce Arians saw him for at least a season, 2 seasons in Pittsburgh. He had him with the staff. And he brings him to Tampa to help shore up their injury concerns there. Now let's talk about what AB's done since he's been there. He joins also like halfway through the season. I think he plays 8 games. And in 8 games, he caught 45 passes, 483 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Now, I understand he's played half a season, but he's 5th on the team in receiving. Scott Miller, 6th-round pick, who caught that wide open, nobody covered him, touchdown pass against the Packers on Sunday. 6th-round draft pick, second-year player. He has more yards than Antonio Brown on fewer receptions with 3 touchdowns, which is, kind of hard to believe. Is Scotty Miller the guy you go downfield for more? Or are they just giving screens to AB? But anyways, he's been all of a blur so far. The 2 games he's been in, he was targeted all of 6 times. He's only caught 3 passes. He does have 59 yards because I think the one was a actual deep ball. He beat somebody, and he has the touchdown off of that. And he ran 1 ball for 22 yards. Did not play again on Sunday. So can you replace a guy? How much of a contribution is 3 catches, 59 yards? Okay, you got the touchdown. I guess it's a contribution, but I could name however many people that probably caught a touchdown for any team all year long. My point is, this is another participation trophy, and I'm just sick of everybody talking about Brown and Bell. Oh, 2 former Steelers, the 2 big superstars. They might get their ring. You'll probably see Brown more if he's available to play. I guess he was injured, maybe. You'll probably, I would surmise he would be more involved. I don't know how much more involved in the Super Bowl. I don't even, if you could blink and probably miss Bell in this game coming up.
Yeah, no, I don't care. It is what it is. Like, I mean, it's,
I told you I had a lot more to say about it than you probably did.
Yeah, in my mind, I tweeted about how, I think Steelers Twitter will implode. I won't be a part of it because, like, the second LeVeon Bell signed with the Chiefs, fans had to realize they probably didn't realize at that time because everyone, was on the 11-0 kick whenever he was signed with the Chiefs. Like, he signs with the Chiefs because he wanted to chase a ring, and he goes there and he's behind Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was their 1st-round draft pick. Who you're drafting a running back in the 1st round, you damn well better be playing him. And then, Darrell Williams has kind of came along the last couple of years. And honestly, if they would have had Damian Williams, who I thought was the star of last year's playoff run, and who I really thought had a chance to win the MVP in the Super Bowl last year, probably is, if he doesn't opt out, probably is your bell cow, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire rotates with him. And Darrell Williams is probably number 3. Bell's probably not on the roster. He's not going to – I will be stunned if he makes any level of impact in the Super Bowl, genuinely, because of the fact that I think Andy Reid, Eric Bieniemy, I think they pretty much have it content with, we're rolling with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, we're rolling with Darrell Williams. If both of them are healthy, they have 2 weeks to rest up. There are guys, and maybe Bell is good for 2-3 touches, for maybe 5 snaps. I'm not going to sit here and bank on him getting a lot of looks. Now, I do think that Antonio Brown has made – a marginal impact with the Buccaneers. And there have been times where Chris Godwin has kind of faded a little bit. Mike Evans, I think, has been one of the best receivers in the NFL that no one ever talks about. You never hear his name brought up in conversations with the top guys. I'm not saying he's as good as DeAndre Hopkins or Devontae Adams, but he's right there. He's not that
Oh,
far off.
absolutely. He's produced like insane numbers, and you just don't pay attention to him because Tampa's usually not on TV.
No, and that's why I'm happy for a guy like Mike Evans. Say what you want about Tom Brady. I'm happy that Mike Evans got the chance to showcase his talent on a national spotlight game in the biggest game of his career to this point. And I hope he does the same thing in the Super Bowl, because a guy like him deserves to have that happen. He doesn't get talked about ever in terms of the elite receivers in the NFL. And then Scotty Miller has been the dude where I sat there watching the game and I'm like, is this guy good? And I think he's good. If I pick you up for even a little bit on my fantasy team, I used him 2 weeks this season. Like, he's good. Like, he's fast and he's good. Like, I don't know what to say about it. Scotty Miller's not a bad football player, and I think AB fits into there because there are those lapses where Godwin, who had a stellar last 2 years, kind of fell off a little bit this year with, Brady's involvement in there. So I do think AB has the likelihood to make more of an impact. And when I say more of an impact, that's not really saying a lot, because I don't envision, unless the earth comes crumbling down on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers football team during the Super Bowl with injuries and random things that happen, and then all of a sudden start going 4 and 5 wide, and Brady just starts digging and dunking to Brown. I don't see it happening.
Well, it is Bruce Arians, though.
He could make a statement, and who knows? Like, it wouldn't surprise me at all. But I think Brown has a better likelihood of making it a clear-cut route to get targets and to get looks and to get usage than Bell. I think Bell has been very clearly, they brought him on for depth, along for the ride, and quite frankly, even when he has got touches, he hasn't done anything. I think right now, every time I watch LeVeon Bell touch the ball, it makes me forever grateful that the Steelers didn't give him the contract that they did. Not because I was never a fan of animosity towards LeVeon Bell. Fans hated him. I understood why he did what he did. I'm never going to question a player wanting to maximize their value. He took a gamble on himself. I don't think he really won said gamble, because he didn't really make it that far into his contract, even though he got his guarantees. He would have made more money with Pittsburgh. But like, I'm fine when a player wants to maximize his value. If Juju wants to leave Pittsburgh to go maximize his value, by all means, go and do it. That's your prerogative. I think Le'Veon Bell was flawless in how he went about handling it. Not by any means.
Yeah, well, he didn't communicate, especially when he sat out the 2018 season. 2017, he said, he played around a little bit, and then he said he was showing up. Here's my thought on Bell versus Brown. Brown was in to cash out and doesn't want to do any work for it. I don't know that Bell was in the same case. I think Bell saw himself being the bell cow, getting a lot of touches, seeing running backs, burn out. You start to get between the age of 28 and 30, and, you're getting one contract, and he's thinking to himself, I'm going to save wear and tear. Well, screw this. I'm going to save he lost money doing it. He took the wrong risk doing that. But he's thinking he's already been seriously injured with the knee injuries twice up to that point, and he's thinking, if I get seriously injured again and I can't play football, I've only played 1 year on a franchise tag, but I still think he lost money in the end run. But I can empathize with it, and I understand where he's coming from. On the other hand, Antonio Brown had already made money off of some off of the first big deal, and then some restructure and extensions that were done in order to make him happy, and he still wasn't happy. And then he tried to bilk everybody, and I think he got $9 million basically. Well, you know what? I can't necessarily say that. I got to look back and see if he got the full cap charge. I think the Patriots tried to recoup some of that. But it was 1 year, $9 million, but your paycheck is divided by 16. So, I kind of wonder how that ended up working out as far as what he got paid there in New England. He probably didn't get the full $9 million, but he probably got a good portion of it still. I think there was like half of it may have been a signing bonus or something of that, $3 to $4 million or something. I'm not looking it up because I really don't care that much. The other guy that's the equation of this is now everyone's going to say you could have had a coach like Bruce Arians, good old Bruce Arians, that's done so much prior to getting to the Super Bowl right here. That's right, folks. The same Bruce Arians that won one playoff game in 7 of the years that he actually coached and took one off in order to go sit in the TV booth. The Bruce Arians that got Ben Roethlisberger sacked more times in the 5 years that he was offensive coordinator than Ben Roethlisberger has been sacked in the entire time since Bruce Arians has left. Granted, Ben took one season off, but it's been 9 years since Bruce Arians has been gone, retired, kind of forced out the way the Steelers don't extend contracts at certain ways. The whole reason is because the offenses stunk. They were just as bad as Randy Fichtner here. I understand, okay, Bruce was there. Bruce was, a wide receivers coach with Bill Cowher in Super Bowl 40, and then 43, he was the offensive coordinator with Mike Tomlin, and then again 45, when they got there and played the Green Bay Packers and lost, he was offensive coordinator there too. However, that 2010 offense was in like 21 overall in the league, and then the other one was right there with it, but I think they scored fewer points, and a lot of those games, you forget, were won off the foot of like a Jeff Reed or a Sean Swisham or a Polamalu pick six. A lot of that was the defense, and we even say that when we're talking about Ben being young and his growing pains and coming into becoming Ben Roethlisberger. Part of it was getting rid of Bruce Arians. Even though that was his buddy, he was getting hit like a piñata. He was starting to miss some games. I understand he missed some sense also after that, but Todd Haley made him into more of a pocket passer, and he had some of his best statistical seasons with Todd Haley as the OC versus that of Bruce Arians. And this isn't an exclusive to just Ben getting hit around. And I had the numbers here, and I'm going to find them. I'm going to find them for us here. It's not here yet. Let me see. I got some other guys too who got some interesting figures as well, and I had to get down here. So Bruce Arians, let me see his win, his playoff win, by the way, since we had the meme out of the Mike Tomlin, he lost to David Garrard and he lost to Joe Flacco and they blew a fourth quarter lead. The Bruce Arians win with the Arizona Cardinals, one of the 2 times they got into the playoffs in the 4 seasons. I think he was there 5 seasons. He missed the playoffs in 5 of his 7 seasons as a head coach, so he only got there twice. He got in with a bye and played the Packers, and they went to overtime where Larry Fitzgerald, if you remember this, had a 75-yard catch and run where Carson Palmer was running for his life. Bruce Arians pretty much ruined Carson Palmer's career. He also had Andrew Luck had one of his 2 worst seasons throwing interceptions and being sacked his rookie year with Bruce Arians as OC and interim head coach, where he won Coach of the Year and then wasn't even there for health reasons for that wild card game either. They went 9-3, and it's the only time an interim coach got there, and that's when we first started hearing this rumbling. He was never put up to be in that position in 2008 or 2007 when Tomlin was hired. You had Russ Grimm, you had Kevin Wisenhunt, who was the previous offensive coordinator under Bill Cowher, and those were 2 of the guys that were brought from in-house. Russ Grimm was the O-line coach, along with Tomlin, who came over from Tampa Bay. Or no, did he come from Minnesota then as the defensive coordinator? Yeah, he had held that post for a year or 2, I think maybe just a year, and he got the job. And a lot of people will tell you, Mike Tomlin, he just inherited a good team. This was Bill Cowher's team that he inherited here. And it's like, what did Bruce Arians just inherit here? Look at all the guys that were there or drafted before he arrived. And look what he did with Jameis Winston, a whole lot of nada. Winston had 33 TDs to 30 interceptions, the only 30-30 quarterback in the history of the NFL. That's what he owes to Bruce Arians there, and also was running for his life. I'm going to find the sacks here too, because this is a huge part of this. Let me see. Jameis Winston was a sack shy last year of being the most sacked quarterback in the NFL, by the way. Carson Palmer was sacked 22 times in 7 games his final season. That would have been a pace of 56. Mind you, Winston was only had 47 last year. Could you imagine being sacked 56 times? Ain't no wonder the guy ended up retiring. He was brought down 137 times in 60 games over 5 seasons with Bruce Arians in Arizona. And Andrew Luck was sacked 41 times with Arians. Ben Roethlisberger, it was 215 sacks under 5 years of Bruce Arians, 202 in the 9 seasons since. We had a little abbreviated year of 2019, so it might have been almost even, but he was getting sacked double that. They prolonged Ben's life. He didn't end up retiring like Andrew Luck or Carson Palmer. I'm not going to say Andrew Luck retired because of Bruce Arians, but it doesn't help that you're getting chased around as a rookie and throwing the ball away, and Jameis Winston had to go get a new job. Not that he was fantastic to begin with, but in this offense, you get to before the bye week. I think their bye week was the latest one in week 12. We had the rumblings of they're not letting Tom Brady play the type of offense that Tom Brady's good at excelling. This was mid-November. This is around Turkey Day that all of this was coming out. There's tension. There's dissension in the ranks. 7-5 Tampa Bay team, and they're going to be in danger of not making the postseason at all. And now Bruce Arians comes out and says, well, Tom's in charge of the offense. He gets to, pick the plays. Well, what does that mean? Does he pick the plays like game planning? Does he pick the plays like, well, you're on the field? Does he call the play? And it was just like, yes, everything. So he just gave it what most people were saying Randy Fichtner should have done with Ben Roethlisberger. That's what Bruce Arians did. So is Bruce Arians the head coach that you absolutely wanted in Pittsburgh that had losing seasons, doesn't get it? I don't care that he won Coach of the Year awards. He got to the playoffs twice. He had one win. Oh, by the way, after they won that game in overtime against Green Bay, they got absolutely smacked around by the Carolina Panthers 49-15 in the NFC Championship. He's got all the same faults now. That's a whole lot of negativity and a whole lot of sass going towards Bruce Arians. Still an accomplished coach. It just shows you how hard it is to win in the NFL, especially playoff games, especially playoffs and playoff games.
Yeah, no question. Like my main take home point is also the fact that I don't, are the Steelers a Super Bowl team if they don't get rid of Arians at any point? No, I don't think anything over the last 9 years changes with or without Bruce Arians. I'm also not going to take away the accomplishments this year because, I had written the Buccaneers off around that point when they were 11-5 or so for the same reasons you just mentioned. I thought they were too inconsistent with the team when they were on. Their defense compliments the Todd Bowles and what he's done for that defense because he's done an absolutely amazing job with that defense. And I think he's worked his way into getting another shot probably sometime in the next cycle or so for he'll come in and have another chance of being a head coach someplace that's not the New York Jets that will actually give him potential support for being a head coach. That being said, I think Tom Brady made that a hub to come down to. He pulled Gronk out of retirement. He was able to go and coax AB into there, regardless of AB's contributions. That's still a free agent haven. They've done really good work in recent years before he got there, and now that was a lot of work of just luring guys in there. And then he inherited Mike Evans. He inherited Chris Godwin. He inherited a very good offensive line that with the addition of Tristan Wirfs in the first round, they became an even more dominant offensive line. Like that offensive line is one of the best in the league. People are saying, well, let Steelers, like I know Filippone continues to roll on this train that had the Steelers sign Leonard Fournette that they would have been a much better team. Leonard Fournette does not make the Steelers a Super Bowl contender. I'm sorry. He didn't
not even the Buccaneers. They got Rojo over there.
Yeah, he did not Leonard Fournette didn't make the Buccaneers. It's just a coincidence that he happened to be on the team. The Buccaneers realistically are in the same exact position right now with or without Leonard Fournette because Rojo did just a fine job because that offensive line is so good. And then you look at that defense. That defense, I think, is amongst the top 3 in the league when they're all healthy. I think they rival the Steelers' defense. Honestly, I think in some points they're probably stronger than the Steelers' defense, just in overall cohesion. I think you can't sit there and say that this is all on Arians. Now, again, I'm not taking away from him because it's never just a coincidence that a coach leads his team to the Super Bowl. You still that takes some ability there. But when he starts making comments like, what changed? Well, I let, Brady started doing his thing. And magically, that's the point of the season where all of a sudden the Buccaneers over the last month and a half have looked, almost unstoppable. I don't really think that is all credit to him. That's more credit to the fact that defense is lights out. And realistically, Tom Brady was able to do his thing. And it's amazing that at his age, this many years in, he's going to his 10th Super Bowl. If they don't sign Tom Brady, like if Tom Brady decides to stay in New England or simply retires and they don't get Gronk, they don't get these other guys, and they either keep Winston or sign a free agent, are we talking about them in the Super Bowl right now? Probably not. So I really realistically don't – I'm not, again, not taking anything away from what the man has done. My point is, I don't think the Buccaneers are in the position they are right now solely because of Arians. And I also don't think the Steelers would have changed anything over the last decade of their existence if they would have kept him on their staff or hired him to be the head coach or kept him as OC or brought him back for a second stint as OC, whatever. Doesn't make a difference.
No one's talking about Ross Cockrell getting a shot at a ring here with Tampa Bay.
Good for him. Yeah, I mean, Ross Cockrell's one of the few guys that left Pittsburgh, even though he wasn't drafted here. He's one of the few guys that left Pittsburgh and still remains semi-relevant. He did a good job in Carolina before he had that gruesome leg injury, and then
floating around everywhere, man.
Yeah, he floated around, but he's remained relevant, which not a lot of guys do. So more power to him.
You know what? Let's also talk about some of the other we talk about that defense. You got a few other guys. I know they had some high draft picks and they were able to add like a Devin White or Sean Murphy Bunting or Antoine Winfield Jr. Over the last couple seasons. But Levante David, Vita Vea, William Golston, all were there prior to Arians' arrival. Jason Pierre-Paul, who blew off part of his hand, was also brought in as a free agent prior to Bruce Arians' arrival. There's already 4 guys right there on the defense, and I know
Barrett as well, if I'm not mistaken. Correct?
What's that?
Shaq
Barrett was brought in last year.
Okay.
So he's been there since Arians came in, but that was a guy that's a piece that was added, not necessarily inherited. Another thing to point out too, real quick, and put a bow on my little rant about Bruce Arians and people who are chomping at the bit. Oh yeah, okay, he won 3 games. Let's talk about another thing with the postseason. I'm always talking about getting into the postseason is an accomplishment. This year there's 2 more teams than usual. It used to be 12, now there's 14 to qualify. That's still out of 32. So to just get there, you had to do some sort of job in order to make it, and to consistently make it there, you must be doing something right. Now you go from that point. How many teams can win on wild card weekend? A total of 6. And you got 2 teams that are on buys, and those were the same figures as before. It was 4 and then 2 in each conference, or 4 in each conference, something like that. So you had like 8. So you have a total of 8 teams each year, regardless of the way the playoff format has been. Maximum of 8 teams that could win a game. You would have 8 if everybody won their wild card game, and then all those teams lost to the teams that used to have the 2 buys, or the other way around now with the teams that have a single buy. So you're not even having 8 teams. Like in the AFC, Tampa won 3 games. They came out of the wild card. You don't even have a full 8 teams or 8 coaches that won a playoff game this year. 8 of 32. Do the math there. It's a quarter of the league maximum that can win a playoff game each year. So when I hear people say, well, Mike Tomlin only won like 3 games since, it's like, how many more people have actually won more? Don't name Bill Belichick. Come on, that's such a lazy argument. Unless somebody has won a Super Bowl or gotten to the Super Bowl recently and came out of probably the wild card, there's only 4 teams that have done it since the Steelers did it initially for Super Bowl 40. The New York, or out of the 5 or the 6 spot, that is. That Steelers team, Green Bay in 2010, somewhere around there whenever Eli Manning got that Giants team to beat the unbeaten Patriots. I can't remember which of those 2 teams that was, since he did it twice, which was nice.
It was, I think the first one, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, maybe like I don't remember which one that was, though. Was that like an 07 or something like that?
2007,
yeah. I think it was in between the Steelers deal and then or the Steelers teams. And then this year with Tampa Bay. So, it doesn't happen that often either. So, I'll give, Arians some credit, but it does make you wonder before the bye week. Now, Tom Brady has never thrown more than 14 interceptions in any of the 20 seasons that he's played. Okay? He had 11 up until the bye week. Makes you wonder. So they still had how many games did they have left on the schedule? I was too busy looking at their defense. I was a little interested here. They had 4 more games left on the schedule. Tom Brady in those 4 games, 12 touchdowns to 1 interception. You think something changed there? You think this is the Bruce Arians? You think Bruce Arians is solely like or is it Byron Leftwich, another former Steeler? All these guys, their names begin with B's, except for Ross Cockrell. Isn't that something too? You got Bruce, Bell, Brown, and Byron. That is something else. So what a coincidence. And then we have Zach, a Z, not a B, a killer Z. Whatever final thoughts you got, man. I think we went over what we were looking to do, but we get on this train and it starts it goes. You know what I mean? It's a runaway train.
Yeah, like I said, no animosity towards Arians. I don't care about a former Steeler in some capacities getting a ring. And if it's Bell, so be it. If it's Brown, so be it. I don't care. Like, it's not going to change. I don't think it's going to improve Bell's ability to make it to the Hall of Fame, because I don't think he's a Hall of Fame running back because of the way his career kind of fell off as abruptly as it did. And I also think that AB is going to have a hard time getting in just due to the way that his career fell off. Now he had a Hall of Fame trajectory, and you can make the argument that maybe down the road at some point he does get in based on just his body of overall work. I don't think a ring changes that. So guess what? I don't really care if someone's going to win a ring. I'm watching the Super Bowl because I want to watch one last football game before we are overly deprived of actual competitive football. I won't be, because hopefully we're playing our season in the spring, but the overall masses of the fans will be deprived of actual football until we kick back off again in August and September. But, it's going to happen. And, there's a lot of stuff going on in Pittsburgh to pay attention to that I think will, be there. So just go in with an open mind. Whatever happens, happens. If the Steelers now that they're going with Matt Canada,
yes,
wait and just see what happens. Like, none of us know what's going to happen. And to sit there and say the Steelers can or won't do something next year, the league looks different every year unless you're the Kansas City Chiefs. So at this point, just continue to just see what happens. You never know what's going to happen every single year, and year in and year out.
Oh, that'll catch up to them eventually too. That huge.
Well, like they're not
$500 million contract.
Yeah, they're not going to win the Super Bowl every single year between now and whenever Mahomes inevitably retires when he's 40. Is there a chance that they're going to start another dynasty the same way the Patriots did? Well, of course there's that chance because they already have guys under contract. But, wait it out. Enjoy the ride.
I had something else I needed to bring up too, because inevitably it'll show up in the comments that Mike Tomlin has wasted the talent that's been given to him. You lose the game, the Tim Tebow and the new overtime rules, and you don't have Ryan Clark there, and that's exactly what you should attack. If you're a good coach, you go after that weakness. Ryan Mundy, that was, and I think somebody else they caught there, but that was Ryan Clark's replacement for that game due to sickle cell disease and not being able to play in the mile-high climate of Denver. And then since then, a lot of people now Bruce Arians, a lot of the scapegoat with that whole season and falling off there. But the Steelers themselves too, don't forget, 2012 and 2013, those 8-8 years, Ben missed 3 games at one point there, and then all of a sudden it started to become the narrative if Ben can play a full season. You started to get some of this stuff, but the Steelers were still qualifying for the playoffs 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017. They still ripped off 4 straight years there in a row, and everyone's going to talk about, well, Mike Tomlin couldn't win. He had Ben, and he had Bell, and he had Brown, and Martavis Bryant is another name we haven't mentioned in news with him. He's going to play in Toronto for the CFL, so apparently not suspended there. So my point with this is that those 4 guys, killer bees, we're talking about the bees, and that's what made me think of this. One playoff game. That's all they were around for, and that was that Jacksonville game, the stinker with all the turnovers and not being able to convert on 4th and 1 with a LeVeon Bell or anybody else that didn't want to hold on to the ball there. Darn it! But they still had they still made it a game. I mean, I know the scoreboard said they lost by 3. I know they had some garbage time points that in the close of that made it look like a little bit closer. But that was really the game where they lost Ryan Shazier. But those other games, I mean, you go back 2013, they didn't have Le'Veon Bell for the first 3 games of the season. This was also a repeat thing where he was suspended after that with the whole marijuana thing and LeGarrette Blount. Then LeGarrette Blount quit on them, and they didn't have a backup running back when he gets hurt in the final game of the season.
Is that the Ben Tate year?
That's the Ben Tate year when they had to sign Ben Tate on a short week to play the Ravens, and Ben Tate let Terrell Suggs eat his lunch and steal his lunch money on top of it, responsible for at least 2 of the turnovers. I think a fumble and then like just a no blocking, and Ben ended up getting strip sacked, I think, by Suggs, if I recall correctly. And in that same game too, Ben also gets knocked out of the game for a few plays, and it's the only time Bruce Gradkowski has ever thrown a pass in a Steelers uniform was that playoff game. Do you think the deck's stacked against you a little more? Let's keep going a little bit more. 2015, that Bengals game, you remember Vontez Burfict knocking out Antonio Brown? Well, guess who else wasn't in that game? Le'Veon Bell didn't play. D'Angelo Williams didn't play. He was still dealing with concussion problems. Ben gets, UFC style on the ground, some business and things, and he comes out, and you got Landry Jones that comes into that game. They're lucky they won that game, and a lot of people will point that out. Yes, they were, but then they had casualties. They go into Denver. They nearly pull it off against, like the ghost of Peyton Manning, and Fitzgerald Toussaint fumbles because he's the only guy that's still left on the running back roster. Why didn't they do better at this in the offseason? It's like they had D'Angelo Williams. They got him because Garrett Blount, they had him the year before, but he quit on the team and then goes to New England and does what he does. Little hugging. I'm doing the hugging for the people who don't have the video. This is the Bill Belichick Dr. Evil hug. Hug. So that's 2015. 2016, they get to the AFC Championship game. They finally have Bell. Bryant doesn't play the entire season. He's suspended. Bell gets hurt in the first quarter of that game after breaking Franco Harris's record for single games, postseason games. He broke the single season rushing record against the Dolphins and broke it again a week later against the Kansas City Chiefs. Goes up to New England, gets hurt in the first quarter. Stick a fork in him. And, they covered AB and they had nobody else. Jesse James didn't get in for the touchdown there either. And then 2017 is the Jacksonville thing. 2018 was the Antonio Brown leaving. 2019 was the Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges show. So, you could be very upset about this year. I certainly am still disappointed. I'm not trying to make it sound like a bunch of excuses. But you have not just Pro Bowl, but all-pro talent. And when people say they wasted that talent, not in the regular season, folks. In the postseason, the reason Mike Tomlin doesn't have those wins is because he didn't have that talent on the field. Plain and simple. And losing Ryan Shazier is another one that was just a critical blow in trying to stop that Jaguars team from where they were spotted points in much the same way as the Browns were in this same game, too. You had Tevin Jones. Mm-hmm. That was his name, not Jones. Smith. That was our guy, the wide receiver.
Yes.
Smith, 50 linebacker for the Jaguars, had the 50-yard interception, and there were fumbles and just a mess. And Todd Haley gets fired there, just much in the same way that Bruce Arians got fired before. And guess what? This was an embarrassing loss to the Browns, and Randy Fichtner's gone too. Do you see the pattern? Offensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, offensive coordinator. Don't say the Steelers organization isn't proactive and isn't trying to do something about it. They continue to do so. Sometimes those things don't work out. But just to show you, Bruce Arians, pretty rough go of it over his coaching career. Wins are rare. Look at Pete Carroll. I'm going to look at all these other people in a future episode. I threw this rant on at the very end because I got the Karnak hat on like Johnny Carson did on the Tonight Show, and I could predict the future, what's going to be in the comment section. Well, he's wasting all this talent. Arians wouldn't have wasted it. Arians wouldn't have had those guys on the field either.
I just saw a good quote before we get off here. DK Metcalf says, the teams figured us out for the Seahawks. You were mentioning Pete Carroll and the Seahawks. Sounds familiar. So, again, it's not the Steelers aren't immune to the happenings of the parody of the NFL. That's just the reality of it. I think fans sometimes struggle to recognize that, because the Steelers have had a lot of talent, and obviously Mike Tomlin gets talked about in that elite conversation. So, a lot of people realistically think that there's just those expectations of needing to do well. But I think, stats guy Daniel Valente or whatever his name is, he's been doing this shtick now with all the teams that lose in the playoffs that haven't accomplished much of anything either with their Hall of Fame quarterback and their offensive weaponry. Like, the Saints have had the best roster on paper now for how many years, and that's fine and great to win in the wild card, and they lose in dramatic fashion the following week. They haven't gone there. Packers haven't. Seahawks haven't. Steelers haven't.
I've done this every year too, and I actually have like a draft I've been working on to update that article. I've been doing that several years in a row. The same usual suspects. Before I had McCarthy in there and Jason Garrett also, and they've finally been passed over on. But where's Bill Belichick this year? You know what I mean?
It's just the reality of it. And just like if I see one more tweet about the Steelers linebackers covering skills players, like, I get it's annoying. They're not the only team that does it, because newsflash, defensive coordinators can't just walk across the field and ask offensive coordinators, hey, what play are you running here? It's like, with the perfect defense out on the field. It's called scheming, but that you're playing a chess match between two coaches. The Steelers aren't immune to it, just like the Steelers aren't the only team that have this stuff happening. I think a lot of fans think the Steelers operate in a vacuum and in a bubble, and they don't. It's just the reality of the world of football, So,
by the way, that play against the Browns, that was a 3 tight end set in the huddle. Then they came out and spread everyone out.
Yeah. Like, you got to adjust somehow, and like, you're changing the entire state whenever you put Austin Hooper in the slot as opposed to having them inline. Like, you're just changing the way the things look. You go and you plan accordingly for it.
And if you're not down that many points, you could probably call a timeout there and at least get something else adjusted there for a third down play.
Adjust properly, or also if you're not down by that many points, also the play is probably not going to be as dramatic in terms of how much it kills you. So
exactly.
Again, these are just things that fans need to understand more. I'm not saying that I have all the answers. I don't. You don't. No one does. But you have to put it all in the perspective of how the world works and how the league works. Like, it's not just cut and dry in a vacuum, black and white, and the Monday morning armchair quarterback doesn't have all the answers either. Just going to be real with you. So, I'm ready to look at the offseason from a lens. You know how I feel about the draft. That's all I'll be watching and paying attention to until the last weekend in April, as I do every year, while coaching a shortened college football season here in the spring. So it'll be a very fun time for me where I will be trying to avoid all of the outside noise of fans complaining about whatever they want to complain about this time.
And they find you too.
They find me.
Coach Metkler on Twitter.
Yeah, go ahead and find me. I don't care. I never shy away from the stuff on Twitter. You know that I take it head on, and I probably go further with some of them than I probably should in terms of how long I keep responding to some of the stuff. But in my mind, I think fans have a right to be upset because there's a certain level of expectations with the Steelers. I think we all expect to see that trophy hoisted. I know fans probably want to see Ben get one more ring, and I understand that's probably a lot of the emotion too, where fans feel like the last decade Ben hasn't made it there, and that's a waste. So I understand that thought process, but don't you think Drew Brees would have rather got one more ring? We sit here and talk about Aaron Rodgers being the greatest arm talent in NFL history, and he has one ring in one appearance. I see a bunch of other guys that could and should do there, and then we see teams like the Rams that were the hottest thing in the league. And then all of a sudden, after their one Super Bowl appearance, the contract situation catches up to them, and now they're, up a creek without a paddle. The Saints are probably going to be unrecognizable for the next 5 years with their cap hell.
Runaway. It's the runaway train, Zach.
Yeah,
we got to get back together on this one for sure.
Yeah, I could talk about this for an hour.
And you left out Tony Dungy and Peyton Manning on top of it, and Tom Coughlin and Eli Manning, who was
unquestionable Hall of Fame coach, unquestionable quarterback. And what did they do together? Are you going to blame that all on Tom Brady? Because it wasn't
Choke artist. Don't ever forget. One and done. That was Andy Reid's motto too for the longest time. Don't forget.
Until you got Pat Mahomes, Eric Bieniemy, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, an offensive line, Frank Clark, Tyrann Mathieu.
The list goes on. Zach, hey man, thanks for joining me once again. I hope our schedules align a little more often. I got to go. I don't even know how long we've been on this thing. We may not need another show the rest of the week. We promised each other we were going to try and keep it short for sake of our own personal lives too. And that never works. Worse than me. It's worse than throwing. Man, if we threw Brian in here, we could do like a marathon.
Yeah, it would be the amount of ads that would be on there would be absolutely insane.
Well, I try. You know what? I turn that off for those of the YouTube people. Like, you can't have ads in the middle of a talk show like this. It just doesn't. They started doing it automatically, and I found the way to shut it off. And that was annoying. Boy, did I! Rightfully so. I got yelled at a couple of times in the comments too. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, folks. His name's Zach, and we definitely, I know I appreciate you. I know everyone else does too. My name's Joe. You don't have to appreciate me. You'll hear it from me. I'll say something back if you get under my skin enough, or I just delete the comments if you're from a rival fan base. So, but still, like, comment, and subscribe regardless. That helps, support the brand here. So anyways, I'm Joe. That's Zach. Until next time, we always encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.